Hello, and welcome to my tutorial series on how to make a 2D mobile platform in Unity. In this series, we're going to be making a game similar to that of the game Super Meat Boy, only I'm going to call mine Super Tofu Boy. In this game, our character will be able to climb walls, he'll be able to slide down walls, and he'll be able to jump off walls, as well as an array of other mechanics. In this first video, we're going to start by setting up the game. Let's begin. So we're going to start off by starting a new project. It's going to be 2D, and I'm just going to simply call it Tofu Boy, and we'll go ahead and create that. So once Unity has opened, we're going to get ourselves a little bit organized. We're going to go over here, go to Create, New Folder, and we'll create a folder called Scripts, and we're going to create another folder. And we're going to call this one Art. And inside this folder, we're going to create two more folders. And one's going to be called Player. And another one, we'll just call this Environment. Just had to remember how to spell that for a second. And then we're going to go back to our assets folder where we put these three main folders, and for now we'll do one last folder called prefabs. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to add some placeholder art to our game. This is not going to be anything fancy, it's just going to be a few blocks to allow us to build the skeleton of this game. And then later on, we're going to be adding more detailed art to it. So for this, we're going to use a free sprite editor that you can find online. Go right here to your search engine. I'm using Google. And this one is called Pascal. So I just type Pascal into my web browser. And here is its website. And you can start an account with it. And right here is where you're going to go to create a new sprite. And then you're going to get this window, which is basically where we're going to build our sprite. And I'm going to go into a lot more detail later on with this, because right now we just want something simple. So I'm just going to go over a few things here. Right here is a toolbar where you can use a pen, bucket tool for painting, an eraser if we make mistakes. A rectangle tool, we're going to be using that where we just want to build blocks. We're going to be using the circle tool and some other things. Right here is the color palette, where we can choose whatever color we want that's represented here. And over here are our layers. Normally, and we're not going to do this today, you build layers when you make sprites sometimes. So we can, here, if we hit here, it will add a layer. So we can, let's say, create a drawing on top and then paint it underneath with a different layer. And then maybe if we want to add shading, we can create another layer on top to do that. So that's what that would be used for. Over here is where we would resize our sprite, and I'm not going to mess with this right now, it's not quite important, but here our sprite is a width of 32 pixels by 32 pixels from here to here and from here to down here. And here's where we can save, export, we'll be using that also. So like I said, I'm just leaving everything right now. We're just going to do something really simple. Tofu Boy right now is basically going to be just a block like so. I'm just gonna take my block tool, I'm gonna go straight across, and I'm gonna go straight down just like that. Gonna go ahead and take our paint tool, this paint bucket tool, and what this will do, it will allow me just to fill this whole thing with color. So I'm gonna go over here and I'm gonna grab this little circle and I'm gonna go up here straight to the upper left hand corner so that the color is white. And then I'm simply going to drag this paint bucket here, left click, and it fills the entire block white. So now I'm going to go over here, I'm going to go to my circle tool, and I'm just going to add a couple eyes. I'm going to change up the color. Right here it has my second color saved. And I'm just going to just quickly make some circles here. And I'll just add another one here. Not really keeping too much track of size here. I think that looks about the same. I think that's good. I'm already on black here. I'm going to take this, going to go back to the paint bucket tool. And I'm going to fill in the black eyes. And lastly, I'm going to just grab this pen tool. And these are the width of the line. So right now we're on the thinnest one. I'm going to go to the next thickest one. And I'm just going to paint or make a small smile like that for Tofu Boy. And right now for placeholder art, I think this is actually fine right here. So over here in this export tool, this little mountain and a sun, I guess it is, on this icon here, I'm going to left click that. And we have GIF, PNG, and zip. I'm going to save this as a PNG file. And then I'm just going to hit download. It's going to start downloading. And I've sent mine to my documents. And I'm going to go over here. We're going to go back to our game. And we're going to attach this. So to attach this, I'm going to go right here to the art folder we created. I'm going to open it up. I'm going to open up the player folder. I'm going to go here to my documents. I'm going to go to my downloads. That's where I saved it. Just going to grab it where it says new Pascal right here. And I'm simply going to drag it right there. And now if I click on this, I'll bring up this in the inspector window, this sprite. And there's a whole bunch of stuff here. I'm not going to go into it all right now. I'm going to go into very little of it right now because we're going to go into this in far more detail when we get to producing the more finalized or more polished sprites that we're going to use. This is basically just going to be a block that's going to be bouncing around. But some of the things right here, this is the pixels per unit. And right now it is default by 100. I'm going to, let's make this 64. Normally when you do pixels per unit, you do it in multiples of 4. I'm going to put on 64 right now. I just want to see what it looks like. And I'm going to hit apply. And then I'm going to go up here and I'm in my scene and we have our main camera. Actually, before that, you can see right here, we have game and I'm going to click on this and it's free aspect, but we are making a mobile game. I want this to be 6:9. It will be more in touch with the shape of a mobile phone or a tablet. At least for our purposes. Sometimes you want something a little more specific in a development like this. So we're going to go to our scene and this white right here is our 16:9 frame we're working with. And I'm going to create, right click. I'm going to create what's called an empty game object. And I'm going to call this player. And actually while I'm at it, I'm going to change the name of our sprite from Pascal. I'm going to change it to Tofu Boy. So in this empty game object, which right now has no components attached to it, I'm going to start building our character, and I'm actually going to start with a sprite editor. I'm sorry, a sprite renderer. So I'm going to click on that, and now you can see this is going to hold our sprite. This is going to hold Tofu Boy. So right here, there's no sprite attached yet, and behind it, its color is white. And I can do different things, and let me just attach it first, and then we'll get to playing with a little bit. Like I can flip it this way. I can flip it on its x-axis. You can see it moved a little bit. Move back on the y one. I can flip it upside down. And I can do other things like I can make it tiled, which we're not going to do right now. If I wanted, I could just tile this and repeat this picture. We're just going to keep it simple right now. And then I'm going to go back and I'm going to take a look at our sizing here. I'm going to click on this, and this is pretty big for a mobile phone screen. So to make it smaller, we want to increase the pixels per unit. And I think that's all right for now. Maybe we'll make more adjustments later to this. And so next we're going to add a small sprite for our environment. Once again, this is nothing fancy. This is just for building a demo. So I'm going to go back over here and I'm going to hit create sprite again. It's going to bring me to a new screen here. And this is going to be even more simpler. I'm just going to hit this rectangular tool. I'm going to go up here, make a thin line. Once again, I'm just going to make a nice easy box here. Just like that. I'm going to go to my color. And this is basically going to be for our platforms or anything we want our character to jump on. I'm just going to make this, let's just make this almost like a straight gray. And then maybe later we'll add highlights to maybe differentiate it a little bit. Gonna go to the fill tool, gonna fill it, just gonna have a nice simple gray block here for the floor and walls for our player. And I'm gonna go here to export. PNG. I'm going to download it. It's going to download the next one. And so we're going to go back into Unity. Going to go back here. Actually, we're going to go back to Art, go to Environment, and then now we're going to put in our next sprite. And we're just going to call this, we'll just call this obstacle for now. As simple as that. And just going to leave that we're just going to leave that like it is for now until we're ready to add in a tile set. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to go over here, we're going to click on our player, and we're going to look here in the inspector window, and we're just going to go over these things right here. These are called components. Anything we put into the inspector window here is called a component. And here we have the add component button, which we will get to in a second. So the very first box right here is the transform. And if I were to click up here, you see these arrows, the move tool right here. These will basically keep track of where our player is in the game. So if I were to move it to left, you can see right there in the X direction, which is in this direction over here, or actually from side to side, it's horizontal. He moved negative 3.28 from the center, which is right here. I'm going to send this back to the center, and same thing with this vertical direction, which is the Y-axis. Does the same thing, and you can't quite see the Z-axis. If we hit 2D, we can. This right here, this blue one is the Z direction. We're not going to touch it right now, but this right here is the two-dimensional plane, our X and Y direction, and this is actually three-dimensional. Even though it's a 2D setup, there still is a third dimension where we can move things a little bit, but it will just be a 2D view. So we're gonna unclick that. The sprite renderer, we briefly touched on it. We'll come back to it later. It basically allows us to render a sprite onto the screen. In this case, it was the picture of Tofu Boy we created. Going down, we're gonna create our first component, and we're gonna make it a rigid body 2D. There's a rigid body and there's a rigid body 2D. So right here, we have the different elements of the rigid body. The rigid body basically adds physics to our character. And we're going to be playing with this a little bit when we get into movement, but you should know right now we're just going to make this continuous, and you can see the many physics attributes here, whether we want things dynamic, kinematic, or static. You know, what the mass is, what the linear drag is, what the angular drag is, how our gravity scale, what's it going to be. All that is right there, all the physics in our rigid body 2D. And we're going to add a box collider 2D also. And now, where the rigid body adds physics, the box collider adds something for the player to interact with. And we'll be using most of these here, you know, like the trigger and such. But right now, I think that we can just leave everything as is. But one thing to take note of is that if I zoom in, we now have this green box. And this green box is actually the collider itself. And if I click here on this little symbol here with the lines in the three boxes, these four squares show up. And these are going to allow me to kind of grab, if I would want to, and change the size of the collider. It doesn't necessarily have to be exactly the size of our character, but we want it that way actually. So we don't want it offset, and we just want this to basically be 1-for-1 on all the edges of our player character. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to add some ground and obstacles for our character to use. We're going to go over here to the hierarchy window. We're going to right click. We're going to go down to 2D object, and then we're going to go down to tile map and then rectangular. And it's going to put up all these boxes right here. You can also get to this by going to component and then tile map, and then to tile map right here. And we're going to call our tile map, we're just going to call it obstacle for now. Now that that's done, we're going to go up to window, and we're going to go down to 2D and then tile palette. And this is where we're going to put our obstacle that we made in our sprite editor. And we're going to put it in here, and that will allow us to be able to insert it into our game. So we're going to go here, create new tile palette. We're just going to call this obstacle 2. Why not keep this name going? The grid is going to be rectangular, cell size automatic, sort mode is default, and then we're just going to hit create. And now it's going to ask us to save this in a place. So we're going to click the art and environment, and we're just going to put it in there. And there, our tile palette is created. Now we're just going to take this for right now and just put it up here next to the hierarchy window as a separate tab for us to use. So now we're going to go back into our art folder, into environment, and here we have our obstacle tile palette. And here we have the original obstacle we created. We're going to go over here. We're just going to change this up to 128. We're going to apply that. And then we're going to put this into our tile palette, just like so. So now with our tile palette, we can go over and I can click on our obstacle here, and I can go over to our game here, our scene, and all I have to do is hit the left mouse button and it will place that sprite right here, just like so. And right here, I'm just making a little floor going straight across, just like that. I think that's good. And I also want some walls. I'm going to go ahead and put one right here. And I think that's good for now. And later on, we're going to do some wall climbing effects. So I'm going to go ahead and put one right here. Now, if I want, I can also get rid of things. I can go ahead and erase them. I can click that. I can say, okay, I don't want that there now. I can space things out, and I can add other. Just put this back a second. And I can scroll out and I can add other obstacles here or any other thing I want to put into our scene. And yes, I know it's a little difficult right now because let's just get out of this for a second. Let's just don't need any more. Let's just close that tab and that will get rid of it. So it's hard to see here, but if you look in our game, we have this nice, neat little gray floor and walls right now. And I think that's good for now. And now if I hit play, let's click on our player for a second. If I hit play, I'm just going to fall right through the floor. See the Y direction because I'm going down, and that's because our tile palette doesn't have a collider. But I can go right here and hit obstacle. That's our tile map, and I can hit add component, tile map 2D collider, and that automatically provides a collider to the tile map I've put in without me having to go to do this for each individual block. So now this whole thing, when I hit play now, my character should collide right with it. And boom, he does. He just sits on it nice and easy. And after that, what we want to do is to our obstacle right here, we want to add a composite collider 2D. Just type in COMP and it will appear. And that's going to add a rigid body. And first thing is make sure this is kinematic so that it stays in place. And go up here to our tile collider 2D and hit use by composite. And what all this did was it made this whole thing, actually, if I click over it, so if I unclick it, you can see that every individual box is surrounded in green, meaning that it's its own individual collider. And what might end up happening is that sometimes when your character is moving along, it might hit and get stuck on all these individual colliders. So when we hit this, the green goes all the way around it, like so, and it treats it like just one solid collider. So that's it for today. In the next video, we're going to be getting started on giving our character some movement. As always, thank you for watching. Like this video, subscribe to my channel, follow me on Facebook and Twitter, and support me on Patreon. And as always, a big thanks to my Patreon supporters. See you next time.